Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm super excited to have my guest today, Jessica Rhodes, because Jessica is actually one of the pioneering founders of what we know as the podcast booking agency space. So she's the founder of Interview Connections, actually the world's first podcast booking agency. Of course, Jessica is a podcast host herself and an author, and she's one of the leading experts in helping experts, coaches, professionals, entrepreneurs be able to utilize podcasting, both their own podcasts and guesting on other people's podcasts to connect with clients as well. So, Jessica, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you join us here today.
Thanks, Kobe. I'm really excited to dive into podcasting with you and your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of real estate agents have their own podcasts. They're starting their podcasts, and of course, a lot of them want to be on other podcasts as well. So I think it's going to be a definitely good discussion today for agents to hear more about the benefits of utilizing podcasts as well. So before we dig into that, Jessica, I'd love for you to have an opportunity to share a little bit more about yourself. How did you get started, and really, what was the idea behind starting the first ever podcast booking agency?
Yeah, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when I was pregnant with my first child over 13 years ago. He turned 13 in March. I was working at a nonprofit environmental group or doing door-to-door community organizing. So this online business space was totally foreign to me. And I asked my parents for advice. I was 24 at the time, so I had my baby when I was 25 and I was like, "What can I do to be a stay-at-home mom?" And my dad told me about the virtual assistant industry. So I feel like, most of the listeners probably have heard of a VA, just, a freelancer that you can hire to help you out in your business. And so my dad said, start a virtual assistant business. Like you will be your own boss and I'll be your first client. I'll show you how to do it, how to set up the business. So I started doing that. My dad was my first client. I was reading all of his books about business and marketing and client retention and all that good stuff. And he asked me to book him on podcasts and to book people on his show as a guest because he had started a podcast in 2012. And so I started doing that. And it was actually a perfect transition from what I was doing before, door to door, because I was already used to knocking on people's doors at 6 o'clock at night. So sending them an email, asking them to do something was a lot easier. So I was booking my dad on podcasts. He referred some of his friends to me as well. So I had, a nice little client load as a freelance virtual assistant and listening to podcasts with business owners, like following my dad and his clients. I really wanted to be able to grow my income and have a more successful business without just working more hours. And so that's when my dad helped me come up with the idea to create an agency, create a company around podcast booking. So it wasn't just hiring Jess Rhodes to, work 10 hours a month on your account, but it was like, this is a package. And if I can build up a team and have the right profit margins, sky's the limit. So I founded Interview Connections in 2013, fall of 2013, and built up a team of virtual assistants to help me service the clients and book the interviews and yeah, and then just kept growing it from there. So I'll pause, but that's how everything got started.
Yeah, so that's really cool because I mean, podcasting probably wasn't as big back in 2013 as it is now. I mean, obviously it has grown so much, right? So when you were first getting started, was there a challenge around, maybe convincing people that, hey, you need to be on podcasts? Was that one of the challenges you faced as, as you started getting other clients for your agency?
Yeah, you are totally right that it was definitely not as big as it was today. And to give the listeners some context, there are probably 3 to 4 million podcasts today. Not all of them are actively publishing, but there's 3 to 4 million podcasts. Back then, there were probably 200,000 podcasts. So it was a much smaller pool. PR firms were not booking their clients on podcasts. I remember because and to answer your question, no, people didn't really want to, not as many people wanted to pay someone to book them on podcasts, but podcast hosts did need guests. And so my clients, when I first started, were all podcasters. So I would my clients were people that, had a show, they needed guests, and they got one of my packages. So for example, my first package was $47 a month, and I would book two guests on your show for $47 a month. And then $77 a month was I would get you, I think, four guests, and I would make a graphic for each episode. So, like, that was 2013. And so the podcast host hired me. And then I don't really remember when it flipped, but there was a time when the demand flipped and so many people wanted to be a guest that podcast host didn't need to pay me to find people to interview because all these people were reaching out to them. So I just transitioned the business from serving the host as paying clients to serving the guests as my paying client. There was a time when it was kind of balanced, but then it shifted all the way over to the guest.
Yes, that's pretty interesting because now I think there's definitely more guests, right, that want
For
to
sure.
be on podcasts, and a lot of them may or may not even have their own show. They just want to be interviewed and interviewed and interviewed. So, one of the questions that I really had for you was, for a real estate agent and professional out there, what's the benefit of starting your own podcast, right? Or should you just be focused on getting booked on other people's shows? Or is it really, do you want to put some time into maybe starting your own show as well?
I am so happy to have the opportunity to be on your show because I actually have a lot of real estate agents that like see my ads and come to my masterclass to learn about this because podcast guesting is a fantastic way to generate leads. And what do real estate agents want? They all want leads. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity. So one thing that I always tell real estate agents is that when you're a guest on podcasts, there's no way of knowing where the listeners live, where are they located. Truly podcasts have global reach. If a host is based in the United States and, probably mostly people in America listening. However, most podcast hosts will have multiple countries represented in their listener demographics. So that's the first thing for real estate agents to know is that if you're going to use the guesting strategy, but if your goal is to only generate leads in, like, I'm in Rhode Island. So if your goal is only to generate buyer seller leads in Rhode Island and you start guesting on podcasts, it may not be the best lead generation strategy because the listeners who hear you on podcasts could be anywhere across the country. The benefits, however, outside of lead generation is search engine optimization. So if you're a guest on 234 podcasts every single month, then that means every single month, another business owner is posting content with you. They're putting a link to your website on their website. They're uploading your interview to YouTube. So now your name and website's on a YouTube title and description. They're posting about it on LinkedIn. So suddenly your footprint online is getting much, much bigger so that when somebody is Googling and looking for a realtor in Rhode Island, say, all of a sudden they see you and all of these podcast appearances you've done. So you've now elevated your status from one realtor in this area to an authority who also is a realtor in this area. So if you can shift your perspective around guesting from lead gen to authority building, then it will work really well for you. But that is a longer term investment. It's not like brand building, authority building will grow a stronger business and a stronger brand, but you don't necessarily see the return on investment in leads right away.
Yeah, exactly. And then, from just your experience, usually how long would you say it takes for, a real estate agent to be guesting consistently on podcasts? You mentioned, I think, two podcasts a month, right? Something like that, where you're guesting,
Hmm.
fairly consistently, not just like once a year or something like that.
Yeah.
How long would you say it takes for them to start seeing some dividends into the effort that they've been putting in long
Yeah.
term? Is it a year, multiple years? What does it look like?
I would give a range of 6 to 9 months before you will start seeing an impact because from when you start the effort of getting booked, whether you're going to, put in some time every week to pitch yourself or hire somebody to book you on podcasts, there's going to be probably 5 months between that start date of starting to pitch yourself to then interviews getting published online. Because, you're going to send out pitches, send out follow ups, the interview will get booked, and then you'll schedule the recording. I mean, you and I connected maybe a month ago or so, and we're recording today. So it takes time for both people's schedules to line up, and then the host needs to edit that show and then publish it. They probably have many other interviews already recorded, so now you're getting in line a few months down the road. So it can be 5 to 6 months before you have interviews getting published. Once you have 3, 4 interviews published, you should see a difference in your domain authority, which is sort of that marker of your authority from Google's perspective. But now a lot of people are using their AI search of choice, ChatGPT, Claude, for recommendations. I've gotten way more leads as of late from AI search compared to Google. So people will go to AI, ChatGPT, and say, I am looking for this type of home, or, they'll put in their criteria for what they're looking for, and they'll ask their ChatGPT who they should work with. If you're a realtor who has been interviewed on 20, 30, 40 different podcasts speaking about the topics and the things that are important to your ideal client, well, who do you think ChatGPT is going to recommend? It's going to recommend you because you're out there as an authority versus somebody who has no content online. All their expertise is just in their head and in person conversations.
Right, exactly. And I think a lot of people think about, AI optimization, right? That's one of the big topics of late. How do I get, myself out there? So search engines or AI search engines recommend me, because it's a lot different than the traditional SEO, right? That people think about. And, this is a great strategy that you can go out there, you can share your expertise, like you said, not just in your head one-on-one conversations, but,
Yeah.
in a more public audience, actually have an online footprint that way. So, I think it's really important for agents to, start thinking more about it as well, because there's a lot of different podcasts out there, this one right here where, it's appealing to other real estate agents. We interview other real estate agents as well. But, aside from podcasts where it's for other agents and we're interviewing other agents, what other types of podcasts would you recommend for a real estate agent to try to get on? Is it more kind of local podcasts, financials? What are some different kind of categories of podcasts that benefit an agent's audience the most?
That's such a good question. And I'm so glad you asked because literally in my head, right before you asked that, I'm like, we should talk about what types of shows. So great. So, okay. So, first, I want to just mention that to get on podcasts and to build your brand, you need to start with your own brand first because a lot of agents, they just have their listing on their Remax site or something like that, and they have like no social media presence. So if you want to build your authority and build your personal brand, you have to have the basics. You have to have a really nice professional headshot. You've got to build out your brand on social media. Ideally, if it's possible, like have your own website with some authority, with some content, not just your listings, but something that communicates your expertise and your authority. So do that first because it'll make you a more bookable guest. It'll make hosts actually want to interview you. And then think about what is your unique selling proposition. This is all going to go into what types of shows, but like, what is your unique selling proposition? Why do your clients choose you? What are the values that you hold that makes your clients align with you? Like I'll tell you, my realtor who helped us sell our last home and buy this one, and eventually when we move again, I will go back to her. First of all, we know her from a long time ago. Like we worked at the same nonprofit. She did the same personal development program called Landmark that I did. So the fact that she went through Landmark, I'm like, I know Jess Powers like has the right mindset. She has integrity. Like that's something that I know about her that like I had worked with a realtor before who like I did not like his tactics with negotiating with the seller. I was like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. It was not in alignment with how I would do business. And so I really liked that Jess Powers had gone through Landmark and gone through personal development work. And so maybe that's a reason why your clients would work with you is because you've worked on yourself. If you have like if your clients are entrepreneurs and investors and business people, they will want to work with a realtor and an agent that also is investing in themselves. So maybe you're going to go on entrepreneurial shows and talk about how you've grown your business. Maybe all of your clients are families with young kids and you're a mom or a dad with kids and you're balancing. Maybe you go on some parenting shows. So the shows you should be going on are the shows that will um, allow your new audiences to get to know you and to be the shows that create content that you would want a prospective client to hear about you because there's a great book called Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Great book. I'm in the middle of listening to it now. I've heard about it forever, so I kind of know the concept. But like listening to the audio version, it's just really reinforcing that your clients will work with you for your why and not just what you do. My dad gave me the same advice in different phrasing. He says people will hire you for who you are, not what you do. And I think that's very, very true in real estate. People will hire you for who you are. Now, every single real estate agent will help you buy or sell a house. Every single one. So the only thing that will set you apart is your story. So find shows where you're able to share different parts of your story.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct because, you mentioned, people hire you for who you are, not what you do, especially that's true in real estate because everybody does the same thing, right?
Exactly.
You're selling the same service, so you have to be able to differentiate yourself when it comes to, finding the right client. So you're talking about if you're an agent, define first what it is that you do differently. How are you different than all the other agents in your market? And then find shows that are similar or are able to feature that, right? Or have clients
Mhm.
that also are able to connect with you on those different topics as well. So maybe if you are, for example, an agent who focuses a lot on real estate investing or working with investors, would you say being on a, financial podcast or an investment focused podcast, obviously would be a good fit for that specific agent, but not necessarily somebody who works with first time home buyers, right? Which is a completely different set of audience.
Exactly. First time home buyers are not thinking about investing. They're thinking about how do I get the minimum down payment
Right.
together. So it's, yes, you want to be on the shows that you're like what you're being interviewed about is going to be most relatable. I mean, that's a perfect distinction of, an agent who's working with an investor. They're going to be having very different conversations about net worth and investing and finance versus the agent that's supporting new parents, first time home buyers, single people getting their first house. Like again, they can't even wrap their head around investing. They're just trying to get their first home. So that's going to be a different type of conversation. I also think kind of to my point before about like the two realtors I'd work with that would have very different styles, like maybe like sales and negotiating type of podcast, like where you can talk about your style. One of the things that I love about my realtor, Jess Powers, is that she has great relationships with everyone. Like the home we're in now, the seller was also a real estate agent. So he represented himself and she goes, "Oh, I had worked with him on other transactions." So she had a good rapport, good relationship. Like you want a real estate agent that um has a good reputation that people like working with because if you want to buy a house and the seller's agent doesn't like your agent, then you're not going to get the house probably.
Yeah, I mean that's something you hear about a lot in the real estate industry, right? Where
Yeah.
if your agent doesn't have a good reputation in the market, then at the very least, everybody stays professional.
Yeah,
You're not going to
exactly.
have maybe as smooth of a transaction as you would if they had
Yeah.
a good reputation in the market as well. So yeah, I mean
Yeah.
those are great, I think great ideas for agents, right? To get on different types of shows. You mentioned sales negotiations, so I've run across some different agents who may or may not even want to be on like a podcast that are also talking to other agents because they're just telling me, oh, I only want to talk to clients, right? I don't want to be on a show where my audience is my competition, if you will. So for agents who, maybe are now thinking more about, okay, maybe I do want to, be on shows where I'm also talking about different topics, not necessarily just trying to get direct to the client, trying to generate leads, because they know this is going to be more of a long-term strategy. What are some things, other than building up your brand, defining your unique proposition that they could do to prepare so that way they're able to actually talk intelligently and have something of value to share on these podcasts where maybe they're talking with another agent or maybe they're talking with,
Mhm.
other professionals, right? Other sales professionals and teaching them the skill sets that's made them successful.
Yeah. Well, first to your point, you've got to get out of to the agents who feel like, oh, I don't want to be around like other agents. You really need to let that go because and I see that with my clients in other industries too. It's not just real estate agents, like coaches or financial advisors. Like, I don't want to be on podcasts with other financial advisors, or I don't want to be on podcasts with other coaches. It's like you're going to cut out so many opportunities if you try to avoid your competition. Like, just lean in, share your story, And the market will choose the person that they most align with. So there's really no risk. If you're just totally honest and open about who you are, there is no competition because everyone's unique and has their own story and their own set of values. Now, to prepare, one of the things I do with all my clients is create a podcast one sheet, which will really help the preparation process because that has you going into interviews with some suggested interview topics and questions. So that way you're not just going in blind, like, I don't know what I'm going to be interviewed about. You take the lead and say, here are some things you can interview me about. So from a content marketing perspective, because podcast guesting is another way to create content in addition to building relationships, you want to think about what are your main pillars of content. What are the how-tos that you teach? What are the whys and kind of the why questions you can be asked about that will showcase your value? What are what is and the information that you can share? What are the inspirational stories? So there's actually a great book that will help you with this. It's called Conviction Marketing by Kelly Roach, and she kind of breaks down exactly like how to create your pillars of content. So once you do that, you can create a one pager as a podcast guest that has topics that a host can ask you about. And then you can actually write out questions that a host could ask you so that you're not going into every interview totally blind, but you have a sense of what the host will ask you about.
Right, yeah, and I think, for the host, just speaking of my personal experience, having a one sheet definitely helps, right? And having a media kit you build out, even if you've, kind of, graduated to that extent as well, if you're
Hmm.
consistently guesting on different podcasts, it makes a host want to kind of interview you more because it's less work for them, right? To know what they're talking about, but also on the back end of things, right? After the podcast has been recorded, the editing, the marketing piece, right? They don't have to go out there. Their team doesn't have to go out there and find all of this information on their own, right? You've delivered, kind of your best to them already, and it works great for both parties.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. As a guest, if you're asking a host, hey, will you interview me? Like, hey, will you give me visibility to your audience? You definitely want to make their job easier. Like, here's my one sheet. Here's some questions that you can ask me. And then from there, I mean, almost all the time, the host will have other questions and things that they're curious about, but definitely make their job easier. And just know that podcasts are not, this isn't like shock radio. You're not going to get like gotcha questions. It's truly a conversation that you're having that's pre recorded one on Zoom, and then it gets edited and published later, but it is a one on one conversation. So you can prepare, have questions ahead of time, listen to the show that you're going to be a guest on to get a sense of their style, but just take a deep breath, relax, and just know that you're going to know the answers to all the questions they ask. And if you don't, take a deep breath and maybe ask them to rephrase the question or say, that's a great question. Let me bring you, and just you'll build up that skill set as you go.
Exactly. And I mean, for me, whenever I've guested on different podcasts, one of the first things I tell the host is, just ask me anything. If I know the, answer, if I'm able to talk about this intelligently, I will.
Yeah.
If not, then I'm going to be honest about it. And I'm just going to straight up tell you this is not something that is in my wheelhouse. Maybe we can pivot the conversation, to something else as well. So it's very authentic, I think, and it helps for potential clients, anybody who listens to podcasts. In my opinion, I feel like it's a much more kind of intimate type of content than you sitting there, editing or doing 24 different takes just to make that perfect video that's 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I mean, all different types of content serve their purpose and have different benefits, but it is so much harder. Like we'll be able to, once this interview is done and published, we'll be able to turn it into 30 different short clips, with Opus Pro, which I love using to create those short clips. Um, but I think it would probably take us 5 hours to like make 30 different clips that, is only going to take an hour for just to create those clips from one podcast.
Yeah, and that's one of the hidden benefits of like, having podcasts, right? Having your own show
Hmm.
too, because you now have a way to, make content consistently, but also not have all the pressure be on yourself. Like you said, you're not the person sitting down filming videos for multiple hours. And you're able to turn this, 30-minute, 40-minute interview into multiple different clips. So that kind of brings me to my next question, which is for people that want to start podcasts, right? Maybe they're an agent that want to start and maybe they want to start locally. Maybe they want to interview like local business owners and just maybe have a smaller audience,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the things that they would need to do in order to prepare and start their own podcast so that way they can interview other people, maybe talk themselves? What are some of the things that they need to do?
Yeah. So first, get very clear on your like why. What is your goal? What is the outcome that you want the podcast to create for your business? Because I think a lot of people start a podcast without thinking it through, and then they don't even get the first episode published. They're like, "Oh my God, this was so much work to even come up with the idea and the title." So get really clear on your why. Why are you doing this? Because this is a long-term commitment. There's no podcast host will tell you that anything measurable happened in their business in the first 6 months of podcasting. Like it just takes a while to find your groove with like what types of guests you like or what topics you like to talk about. Create the right intro. Maybe you're going to redo that a couple times. So just know that it's a long-term commitment. And if you're down to commit long term, then really get clear on the outcome. Like, what's the purpose of the show? Maybe the purpose of the show is for you to be a leading podcast spotlighting your area. And I think that's a great idea to be, there was a podcast, I don't know if they're still publishing, probably not because it's been like 10 years, but it was called Hey Rhody. And it was like a Rhode Island podcast. And they would talk all about what's going on in Rhode Island every weekend and like the events and interview different business owners. And it was fantastic. It was like the podcast of Rhode Island. So you can make a podcast about your area and interview different business owners and maybe interview your clients about their experience finding their dream home in your area. You can get creative with it. Or you could go the route of being a solo podcast where every episode is 10 or 15 minutes. You map out 50 different ideas of topics of things that you want your audience to know, things you would want your clients to know. You could batch that out, batch record it in 2 days, and then have a weekly podcast for for the next year. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I would recommend working with a podcast producer, like hire a company. There's a range. You could find people in the Philippines for $100 a month, all the way up to $5,000 a month production companies, locally. So find a service that works for you, works with your budget, because there are people you could even go to a studio and it's really concierge level service. But I would definitely recommend getting help because editing audio is, unless you know how to edit audio, maybe you're a musician, don't DIY it because if it sounds bad, it will be bad and nobody will listen to it.
Yeah, it becomes an unpleasant thing for people to listen to, right? And that's, you don't think about it too much, but it's like, if the audio isn't great, I think people talked about it on like when people started YouTube videos first, right? It's like the video quality could be bad, but definitely, make sure the audio quality is not, because if the audio quality is bad, nobody's going to watch your video. But if the video quality is bad, at least people will like just put it to the side and just listen to it, right? And that could work too.
Exactly. Yes. Most people will listen to the audio. Like I think the video mostly is for clips for a podcast. I mean, even if I'm on a show where the whole video is published, usually the views on YouTube are much lower than what they'll get on their audio podcast.
Yeah, 100%. Because a lot of times when podcasts run a little bit longer, right, than a traditional like
Hmm.
video would, and people want to usually listen to this, and maybe you have actual statistics and numbers on how this works, but people usually want to listen to podcasts as they do something else, right? Is that something that you,
Exactly.
you do you have like statistics on this or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have them off the top of my head, but like 100% people listen to podcasts audio only while they're doing other things. I'll listen, it'll just be playing off on my phone while I'm doing stuff around the house. Or maybe I'm sitting at my desk, but I have it playing out of my phone and then I'm doing something on my computer. So I'm very rarely will watch a YouTube video unless it's like a tutorial and I need to see what's happening on the screen. I don't need to sit and watch two people talk to each other. I'll just listen.
Right, 100%. And just from like personal experience, we know that that's usually where most people are spending their time, listening to podcasts is as they do something else, right? As they're working
Mhm.
out, people love to put podcasts on when they're driving, as well.
Yeah,
Maybe that's where, a lot of our listeners are doing right now, right? And listening to this specific show.
exactly.
Yeah. So something else I really want to kind of talk about with you as well as we kind of just wrap up for today is just there's a lot of different things happening in the real estate industry where people are taking on different roles. Agents are now stepping up into becoming coaches themselves as well. There's a lot of agents who are successful that coach newer agents. Maybe they
Hmm.
monetize in different ways, like starting a team, starting a brokerage, or just coaching agents for a fee as well. So for agents who are stepping into that space. I'm assuming there will be a different type of audience that they're trying to target, right? So for those types of agents who want to reach other agents, or maybe want to reach real
Hmm.
estate agents that want to upgrade their business or want to coach other people, what are some of the better strategies for these types of agents to A, craft their unique proposition, but B, also be able to find shows that are fitting for, their specific audience as well?
Yeah, so much of what we've already talked about applies, and your topics and what you're being interviewed about will be more specific to the challenges that you will help your clients when you're coaching them. So, whatever those main outcomes are that you help your clients, like whether it's like growing your client base, like increasing your authority, like running your team, like whatever those main things are, that's what your interview topics and questions will be around on your one sheet. And then the types of shows that you'll focus on will be more targeted to real estate agents. There's a lot of real estate podcasts. There's a ton of podcasts for real estate. So you would kind of focus more on the shows that your ideal clients are listening to. And then you would have a call to action at the end that directs the listeners into your funnel. For lack of a better word, it is your funnel. It's where can those listeners go that would move them closer to working with you as your coach. So maybe you do a free challenge, maybe you have just a link where they can book a discovery call with you and talk with you one on one. Maybe you have a free lead magnet. Get them to one place where they can opt into your list, they can book a call with you, and that way they can get closer to ultimately working with you.
Yeah, 100%. I think podcasting probably works a lot better, right, for people who are in that space. You obviously have helped a lot of coaches
Yeah.
be able to utilize podcast guesting as well. And really just, would you say, for somebody who is in that specific type of space, right, somebody who is more looking to work with coaching clients or other agents that are working within their courses, would you say it's maybe faster for them to build up an audience or get some leads from podcasting than a traditional agent would?
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is because there's no geographic boundary to where they can work, and there's just a much larger market that they can serve. If you can, if you're a coach and you can coach any agent around the world, then there's just so many more people that could hire you versus if you're a buyer or seller agent, mostly specializing in a specific area. And I know agents will say, "Oh, well, people move to Florida. There's all these people that are moving to Florida." It's still a little bit tougher. It is still a much more narrow niche that, a smaller pool that you're swimming in to get clients. So for real estate, I would love to see more real estate agents do podcast guesting. It's just the challenge is most agents that I talk to are it's just so much like the here and now. Like I need clients now, I need sales now. And it really requires a longer term vision. Like you have to, like in 5 years from now, you want to be, top of your area, like 10x in your income, it's gonna take an investment in your brand. You like at some point, investing in your brand is going to make you a stronger business, but the challenge of that is you have to be able to invest in brand building for a much longer period of time before seeing the difference that it has on your business.
Yeah, and I think those are, a lot of agents who are thinking much more long term are the ones who are doing that. And you can definitely see the results happening over time, over multiple years, 2, 5, 10 years. Those are the ones that are going to make the big difference versus the agents who are just kind of going out there still, even though they're 5, 10 years into the business, chasing their next deal and still struggling over finding their next commission check as well. So that's
Yeah.
actually great advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for appearing on the show today. I think you shared a ton of value for our listeners out there, especially real estate agents who are thinking more on, building up their long-term business, who want to start guesting on podcasts or maybe want to start their own show as well. So for any agents who are out there, anybody who's listening to this that want to connect with you, that want to learn more about how they can get on more shows, how they can get on 2 shows a month consistently, what are some of the best ways for people to connect with you and to learn more about what it is that you guys are doing?
So go to interviewconnections.com, interviewconnections.com. That's my website. At the top of the website, there's like a bar right at the top that will show you when our next podcast guesting masterclass is. This is a free 4-day workshop where I'll teach you all about podcast guesting. So interviewconnections.com is where you can find that and everything else I have going on. And I'm just so grateful to be on the show because, like I said, I have a lot of real estate agents that find me and want to learn about podcasting. So I'm excited to have this podcast that I can send to every real estate agent that connects with me. So this is a win-win.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for being on the show. And I will definitely leave your website link in the description, the show notes down below. So that way it's easy for people to find. But other than that, I just want to say thanks again for being here. And before we let you log off for today, is there any last piece of advice, any last tips you just want to end off with and leave with the audience today?
Invest in your brand. It's your future self will thank you if you can, sacrifice a little bit of your profit today to put it back into brand building. You'll build a much stronger business over time.
Absolutely. Jessica, thanks again for being on the show. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next show. Take care.